The truth is, I think you can only really hope to influence one or a half a person in your entire life, and then that is a lot. That is a lot. Like something truly changes. I was told no so many times by people that I kind of just forged a path, and I do think that it is incumbent upon an artist to forge their own path. And if people are saying you're wrong and you feel very strongly about it, you're probably on the right track, and then you're clearing the way for other people. And it has to be you. You cannot be somebody else. I'm Lisa Yuskavage, and I'm a painter. When I was in undergraduate school in my third year, I went to Tyler School of Art Temple abroad to their campus in Rome, and we got taken to Venice on our Thanksgiving. So it was dark and cold, and the teacher was this young, effervescent woman named Flavia, and a couple of us followed her into this church, and it's the Church of San Zaccaria. Excuse me to the Italians for mispronouncing it, but she comes in and she puts money in the meter and the lights go on. And it's a painting called The Sacred Conversation, or the Sacra Conversazione. It's a painting of 4 saints standing in an alcove or a nave that Bellini painted to mimic the actual same church. I looked at it and I realized, where are they? I realized that it was life after death. This was a moment in time that they're being brought back together, that their suffering had ended. What really has surprised me is how none of the saints were looking at each other, and no one was interacting at all, but they all seemed to be doing something like touching something, and like they were like in a meditative state. I was very puzzled. The lights go out, we put some more money in, and I could not stop looking at this painting. And I love the idea, what is a sacred conversation? In a way, abstraction or painting, the abstract in a painting, the formal in a painting, is the sacred conversation within itself and to the viewer. These saints all apparently did not know each other, but they all were murdered because of their belief in the baby who would later be murdered, right? So that's the story that you're looking at. And I do think it's the very important driver in how I think, in particular about the work I'm doing now. It's always something that I've wanted to be able to capture, is the way in which painting can bring things from different times together in a room. My foundational artworks were these bad baby paintings that I made, and I made them at a time of great turmoil for myself. I had this realization that paintings, what if paintings had feelings? What if they were like not inanimate objects, but had persona, in the sense of the way, Greek myths, everything is personified. How does it feel when I'm making it? How does it respond to me, and how does it respond to the audience? What jumped into my mind was, it was a little bit like a pubescent kid. In particular, my experience of being a pubescent kid is like that I started growing these boobs that I wasn't ready for, and the way the world, in particular men, or anyone, was seeing something, my body was saying something that I wasn't ready to have the conversation about. And that's sort of the dilemma of puberty. And I said, well, what if I used a pubescent girl to depict what it's like to be a painting, in the sense that it doesn't want to be looked at, but then it's going to try to control that. So I think, like, if one wants to look at what I'm doing, it's like the personification of painting is what the images are. In other words, a painting hangs there and you can just disregard it, or you can stare at it, you can make of it what you want. It can't really do anything. It can't talk to you, it can't scream, it can't walk away. So these paintings kind of were delivering that, but it was really not about the kid. But of course, when you're making images, that ultimately is what people talk about. But I had a much bigger idea about paintings and the vulnerability of an artwork. One of the most important teachers I ever had in terms of how my life unfolded was my high school art teacher named Zena. I really butted heads with Zena because I wanted to learn to paint and draw, and she wanted to do crafts. And there's nothing wrong with crafts, but that's not what I wanted to learn. So my mom helped me, and we found in the summer between like whatever it was, sophomore or junior year, a class at Tyler School of Art. And that teacher was Richard Racelis. He was an extraordinary teacher that actually taught me in a positive way. He took brown paper and put it around the edge of the room and put the, whatever it was we were drawing, whether it was a model or still life, big setup behind us. So we would have to draw with our back to it. And I remember the first several times I did it, I kept forgetting what I had just seen. And it taught me that I had to create a system for looking and recording something. But when I was in high school and Zena found out that I had taken classes elsewhere, she was the first person in my life that taught me that someone could actually like put a hex on you or try to put a hex on you. And there was like a scholarship for the most gifted artist in the class. And you know, every year you would get this big scholarship that paid for your 4 years of education. And Zena made sure I didn't get it. But she did teach me an extremely valuable lesson that I needed to learn again and again and again. I learned to sort of adapt and not let that kind of completely throw me off and not become bitter about that. The experience that influenced me to want to become an artist, it's kind of goofy. I somehow decided to write poetry. I didn't feel any shame in sharing the poems with people, but also I started to find ways to draw something or find pictures in magazines that would illustrate the poems. And this book became super popular. And people would like line up like, can I get it next? Can I get it next? And it showed me something, how powerful being an artist is that, you know, instead of people making fun of me for being honest, it kind of gave me this type of connection to people that I began to really feel like was so incredibly special and very extraordinary. And I kind of wanted to live in that world because I realized I am pretty much a dud if I wasn't an artist. And I think that connecting is what making art is about. I was in graduate school, and Mel Bochner, who does not seem like a likely teacher for somebody like me, you know, he was one of the teachers at Yale, and he said something to me, there's a difference between making an illustration and making a representational painting. And you better know how to find that difference, or you're going to spend your life making an illustration. Then when I would make work that he would say, now you've got it, is when the picture is telling the story through the formal language, that the telling is in the form. So how color, line, form, composition, all of the elements that make up an artwork that is in the world of what I'm doing is actually how the sort of message gets across. So I think knowing those two things, I could actually say was very influential and kind of stayed with me. I was pretty lost. It was before I made those Bad Baby paintings, and I had a show, and I stopped painting for a year, and I was trying to figure out what I would do. Like, will I make movies? Well, like, I don't know. I knew I wanted to make art. It was the early 90s, and I was looking for a way forward at a moment when I did not know what to do as an artist. There was something I wanted to say, and somehow painting was kind of stifling how I could progress in it. When I went to see the Banality show of Jeff Koons at Sonnabend, and then at the same time, somewhere in Soho at Metro Pictures, there was a Mike Kelly show of dolls on the floor with Afghans and photographs of adults smeared in feces. And I was looking at these two shows, and on my walk home, I realized these works really contain something very important that I wanted to have in my work. But the question I asked myself is, how could that be a painting? These were not paintings, but there was something so important in terms of the energy and the content. So when I went back to my studio, I made the object that I wanted to see. It's almost like if you were a chef and you kept on wanting to eat something, nobody was cooking it, you kind of go, oh, it's a little bit like that, but it's not that. So you go and you make it. When I was in this period where I stopped working for a year and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I know I was doing something to earn a living, but the Film Forum had these film series. So I went and saw every single Fassbinder film. And there were a number of things in Fassbinder that really struck me, and one of them was the way he reused this cast of characters. And I had been thinking about how to create a cast of characters that I would reuse. And like, I'm a big Jasper Johns fan, and his words, that a quote of his is, take something, do something to it, ditto, ditto. That wasn't exactly what Fassbinder was trying to do, but I thought, like, as a figurative painter, you know, you can constantly create, like, here's a new scene with new figure, and like this one and that one and this one. I said, but that's not really what I want to do. I'm interested in progressing through something else. What if I take the same characters and repurpose them and reuse them the way Fassbinder did? Another thing that really influenced me was David Lynch's films in the way that he uses the camera. He often would take the camera and like zoom into like a crack, and like in Eraserhead, the guy's just found out he's going to be a father, and he's freaking out, and the radiator in his cheap apartment starts clanging, and then the camera goes down under the radiator, and then it opens up to a stage, and on the stage is a kind of weird Marilyn Monroe looking creature with sideburns or foam, and she's singing in heaven, everything's gonna be all right, and she's doing this ridiculous little dance that's kind of not good, and it's just totally absurd. So the idea of taking the camera in and finding what's happening in there has inspired things in my own work. More recently, I did a painting called The Artist Studio, and I decided to imagine what happened if you went to the other side. There's a figure, actually, of the Bad Baby that I took out of the old painting, and as what would happen if she was now repurposed in a new painting. And she's no longer in the sfumato. She's now standing on a stage. Behind her is another painting that isn't quite a painting of mine, but sort of references it. And behind that is a self-portrait when I was a model for some arts students. I have a painting of myself in that. Anyway, I imagined what would happen if you were on the other side of that. When I really think about it, the book that influenced me the most, it still does, is a book of Wallace Stevens' collected poems, and in particular a poem called Final Soliloquy of the Interior Paramour. And it is very much concerned with the idea of the imagination. And in a way, that poem made me think about the Sacred Conversation paintings by Bellini and the imagination as the highest good. And bringing things together in that way, I thought was quite powerful. The field of psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, has been a very big influence on my thinking. I'm a very analytical person, and it helped me to like look at things very structurally and analytically and not be stuck in a gear. So I use it a lot to sort of think my way through work. I think in the same sense of the David Lynch idea of moving the camera, it's like to take the imagination to sort of think through things, to be able to think through ideas and problems. And I think that being an artist is a discipline where you're thinking through problems that you make up yourself, ideally, but you know, you have to find a way to structurally think through them. I think that what I think is interesting about my work and what people are taking from my work are not, you know, some people take the surface of something without understanding where it's coming from. There was an artist who took something from it. He said that he had been ashamed of the fact that his mom was mentally ill, and then he read some quote of mine about weaponizing shame, and he realized he knew what to do, so he started to include his mother's mental illness, her drawings, into his work. That's the kind of influence you want. The thing that I have noticed is that I think people have become professionalized too quickly. And I did get lucky because the art world did not invite too much professionalization in the early 90s. And probably if I had been in the shoes of young artists, I probably would have gone where it's obvious to go, which is to go where the love is. But I do think it's problematic to not experiment and to not make art just to make art. I think people stop experimenting, they start fulfilling what people want from them, and it's very hard to grow when you're filling, product. And you have to remain free. How do you become free? Well, that's, a totally different question.